If you hired a jazz bassist for this, they would reharmonize it. Yeah, and they'd get fired. Ugh, some of y'all really miss the point of music theory. Let's fix that. Hi, my name is Matty Gregg, and I am starting a music theory revolution. We are getting rid of the gatekeeping, getting rid of the elitism. Music theory is for everybody. So come with me on this philosophical journey where we can break down some preconceptions, misconceptions, and talk about what music theory actually is and isn't. Let's start with this preconception. Music theory is a set of rules you must follow in order to make good music. This is not true. It's called music theory, not music law. What it can be used for is to develop an idea of a certain set of guidelines, conventions, and precedents for making music in certain styles, or using a certain musical device to evoke a certain type of feeling. Classical music tends to do this. Blues tends to do that. These chords in this order tend to evoke this certain type of feeling. Harmonically, rhythmically, etc., etc. And you can draw upon these things to make music in those styles, or that sounds like those styles. Or you can feel free to mix it up and do whatever you want. But Matty Gregg, won't studying these styles and the theory that goes into it make me less creative? Well, let me pose this. Music is a language. This actually has a scientific basis rooted in physics and mathematics, but we're not getting into that today. Maybe another day. And if music is a language, which it is, then music theory is the study of the grammar and syntax of that language. So how would you go about learning any other language? Well, you start by learning pre-made canned phrases. Hi, how are you today? My name is blank. What's your name? Where is the bathroom? And this is just like when you start learning music, the first thing you do is you learn music that other people have written, whether it be a song or a phrase or a riff, something like that. And then you learn specific vocab words that you can plug into those phrases. Instead of where is the bathroom, now it's where is the museum? And then in music, you learn, well, if I have a chord progression that looks like this, then I can go to this chord at the end of it instead of that chord. Or I can go up and play this note instead of that note. And then when you start to string together a bunch of phrases that you have memorized and then plug in the vocab that you've learned, you can actually start to converse with people, right? Or create your own paragraphs, your own writing. Of course, it's derivative at this point, but you're starting. And then you start to study the actual grammar and syntax of the language, how to decline and conjugate different parts of speech. And when you start doing this, you can begin to formulate your own original thoughts, your own original phrases, rather than relying on the ones that you've memorized. You can start to communicate more accurately and effectively. You're becoming more fluent. And even as a fluent speaker of language, you can still learn new vocabulary words that have specific meanings or evoke certain feelings. And when you learn what they mean, you can then apply it to your original phrases or even pre-made ones. Just like in music, as you learn new musical devices or phrases or specific things meant for specific contexts that evoke a specific feeling, you can then utilize that in your own original thoughts. It's like musical vocab or musical grammar. I didn't know I could say it that way, but I guess I can. And now I know how to. As a lifelong learner, you're always learning new techniques, new vocab, new literary devices, musical devices, etc. You never stop. Would you ever say a writer is made less creative by learning more linguistics, more techniques, more vocab? No, of course not. The more tools in your toolbox, the more versatile you become. The greater ability you have to bring the right skills to the right context and communicate more effectively. Well, but Matty Gregg, isn't music theory not versatile and only good for classical music? Well, no, because that's not what music theory is. Music theory isn't the study of classical music. That'd be like saying linguistics and etymology is only the study of Greek or Latin. But why do so many have that misconception? Because institutional music education tends to use the conventions and precedents used by European classical composers as a basis to teach the fundamentals of music theory. And though this type of music is a good basis to learn these principles, this implicitly places this music on a pedestal, attributing value and dominance over the study and the field. And moreover, due to problems inherent in the one-size-fits-all higher education model of pedagogy, these institutions often fail to instill in students the understanding that these precedents and conventions are just that, only precedents and conventions that this era and style of music followed, tended to follow. So you see, this misconception that music theory is a set of rules boxing you in, and that music that follows these rules is better, is actually an ill proliferated by educational institutions, not by the theory itself. So now that we've established what music theory is and isn't, and broken down this misconception, where does that leave music theory? How do all these different styles of music fit into music theory? Returning to the analogy of language, you tell me, would you write a persuasive essay the same way you would write a scientific academic journal? No. Would you write a tweet the same way you would write a letter to your grandma? I don't think so. Each of these contexts tend to have guidelines, conventions, precedents to make the language more appropriate for that context. And music, being a language, demonstrates this same phenomenon. Music in all different styles, from blues to classical to hip-hop to rock to EDM, are all varied and contextual. But music being a language, they all draw from the same basis of grammar, syntax, and functionality. And music theory is the study of the way music tends to act in all of these contexts, applications, and genres. Oh, but Matty Greg, these guys didn't know anything about music theory, so all of your analyses are BS and don't actually matter. The Strokes would probably laugh at this. I love this band because they have this way of making their guitars sound as if they're crying. You can take the theory and shove it. It means nothing. If the sound works, that's all there is. I get comments like this all the time. And all the time, I think one of the most salient analogies to help people understand this is in cooking. Just because a chef doesn't know what the Maillard reaction is, doesn't mean that it's not happening when they cook. But furthermore, weird, Julian Casablancas has gone on record multiple times saying that him studying theory at college had a huge influence on his writing, and he himself actually liked multiple of my videos on Instagram, and Albert actually commented once saying, wow, that was fun, just watch all of them, more please. So who's shoving what now? You gotta do troll patrol sometimes. But this person does actually have a point and is actually hinting exactly at how it's possible that the theory behind the music can still exist even when the composer or the writer or the people playing it aren't aware of it. Let's talk about the point of music. The point of music is to use sound in order to communicate or evoke an idea, a feeling, a narrative, etc. in humans. And songs do the same, but with sound and lyric. And if that's the point of music, then the point of music theory is to, after the fact, analyze and theorize about why and how the music does that, how it evokes or communicates that feeling or idea or narrative. And once you have analyzed it, you now understand and have in your toolkit the ability to create something with a similar feeling. Look at that! You can use music theory to write. Or you don't have to. You could just freestyle and make something that you like, but then use music theory after the fact to analyze why and how it worked, and then reproduce it. So, to my friend here, it doesn't matter if they knew it or not. The music theory still exists. And furthermore, this part of the comment where they're talking about how they love the band because they have this way of making the guitars sound like they're crying, well, that's the beginning of a music theory. This person is telling me to take my theory and shove it, but they're beginning to musically theorize themselves. Like, could you imagine this in any other field or discipline? Like, imagine a film buff going up to somebody, discussing the cinematography of a movie that they themselves love and saying, you could take all this discussion of cinematography and shove it. It just looks good. That's the way it is. Like, what? No. So it asks the question, why does this matter so much to this commenter and so many others who leave comments in this vein? Well, frankly, I think it's because there's a part of them somewhere in themselves that desperately wants to create something as amazing as the music or art that they themselves admire. They aspire to create something. And by denying the validity of the theory of the field and convincing themselves that the artists that they admire didn't use or need theory, well, they are simply safeguarding and protecting that part of themselves that wants to make something. I want to make something, and if they didn't use the theory and didn't need to learn and study up, then I don't need to either. If I can convince myself that a bunch of friends in a garage just tripped and fell into a generation genre-defining masterpiece, then that means that I too can trip and fall into creating such a defining masterpiece of work. And I get the comfort in that, because learning a new language is very hard. It's very difficult. All over the world, it's well known that learning a new language is one of the most difficult undertakings. And of course, it is possible, and it has been done many times, to make an amazing piece of art without it, but being educated only makes it easier. And it certainly doesn't get in the way unless you get stuck on the rules and what the man, the institutional educations in this context, says. Like this other friend of mine. It's actually an A dominant 9, not a C sharp half diminished. This is in reference to a theory video I was making on The End by My Chemical Romance. And, you know, if he's right, he's right. I went and double-checked. I was like, oh, did I miss something? But I responded, I'm sorry, my friend, but where is there an A? I've checked, and all I am finding is C sharp, E, G, B, which would be a C sharp half diminished 7. To which they replied, it's implied. Sit down at a piano, and you'll see how dominant chords actually work. To which I replied, I understand how dominant chords work and the role diminished triads play in them. However, I don't believe an A in the bass is implied in this context. Furthermore, I don't think there's any basis for introducing an extrapolation into an analysis like this, where most people are interested in how a song works as is, the way the members of the band themselves have always played it. To which they replied, I've been playing jazz for close to 50 years, so I know perfectly well how this works. Again, do your due diligence and sit down at a piano and you'll see how dominant chords actually work. The elitism and gatekeeping on display here. This person probably learned jazz at a problematic institution. The hubris and elitism to attempt to assert that the people who wrote the song and play it all the time, well, they're wrong. It's actually an A dominant 9. There should have been an A in the bass there. Because, of course, as we all know, there's only one right way to do music, and there are rules to this, right? My brother in Christ, this is emo-core punk rock, not jazz. To which they responded, if you hired a jazz bassist for this, they would reharmonize it. Yeah, and they'd get fired. You know, I was in the car with my girlfriend a couple of weeks ago, and we were listening to My Chemical Romance, and in the song, I Don't Love You, she said, oh my god, I love this part so much. Sometimes I cry so. The way the melody moves down and the way they sing it, it sounds like crying. Even though she knows nothing about the grammar and syntax of music, she developed this theory of how the artist used sound and music to communicate the feeling that they were trying to communicate and invoke. Now, compared to our jazz bassist friend, I would think that this theory that my girlfriend came up with is a better music theory than whatever this guy was saying about the way the chord actually is. Because that is elitist and gatekeeping and everything that people think is the problem with music theory, but is actually the problem with elitist people taught by elitist institutions staunchly believing and asserting that there is only one correct way. So, if you find yourself on either side of this spectrum, just know that my channel is a safe space to unlearn these behaviors, and I will make sure of that. You hear that? No gatekeeping, no elitism, no BS here. No hoity-toity conservatory elitism, and none of this you smarticles aren't allowed in my cool kid corner type gatekeeping. None of that. Get out of here with that crap. So, there you go. My name is Matty Gregg, and I am inviting you to join my music theory revolution. Feel free to check out all of the other videos on my page, engage with some people in some meaningful and civil discussion in the comments. Like, subscribe, comment, share, all that good stuff. You can feel free to take private lessons with me if you'd like one-on-one attention in helping you towards your musical goals. Or you can patronize me by patronizing my Patreon. Speaking of which, thank you very much to my current patrons. If you're interested in joining the Patreon, we have some cool stuff, including access to a Discord where we can talk music, memes, video games, whatever you want. There's tiers that allow you to request a short on a specific song. You can also take part in a masterclass that we do once a month where we discuss all kinds of music, whatever questions you bring to the table. And you can get access to the instrumentals that I make for my videos, including the one you're hearing right now. And if you like live music, well, we've been doing this series where we take beloved albums and play them front to back. We did Is This It by The Strokes, we did Abbey Road by the Beatles, and in July 15th, we are doing The Black Parade by My Chemical Romance. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, make sure you put that on your calendar. And expect some short form and long form analyses of music from The Black Parade by My Chemical Romance. And there you have it. Thank you so much for watching, my friend, and I hope you learned something today that you can use in your own music, your own writing, and your own life.